So I'm Charles Gallia, and I'm going to share a reflection. But first, one way to make yourself panic right away is if you look at the file folder that you grab and it says dog vaccinations. But fortunately, the content is right. So about 39 years, 5 months, and 16 days ago, I mustered the courage to go to an AA meeting. Not knowing anything, I picked the one that was the closest, and I could get there before I changed my mind. It was in inner southeast Portland. It was a place called Scully's. It was rough. There was smoking, all men. Many lived on the streets and hadn't showered or shaved. But I sat through it. And at one point, a person came into the room, and I was probably actively hallucinating. And some of the people recognized him, and they talked him calmly to the back of the room, gave him some coffee, and he calmed down, and the meeting continued. I shared my experience with a person who was kind of guiding me through this process. He was an MSW going through his own journey. And he asked me, how did that make me feel? And I said, well, kind of conflicted. Many of the people there knew each other. And I also found myself being pretty judgmental. Plus, they talked a lot about God. And it was tough for me to feel a connection to the people that were there. And so he said, well, first off, there's lots of different meetings, all kinds, and maybe you just find one that you're more comfortable with. And second, it may be fortuitous, because that's about the most intense meeting you could ever pick. And you made it through, and you're sticking with it. And then he said, the God thing is a little tricky. The point is to come to believe that there's a power greater than yourself that could help. And frankly, it could be a doorknob or a process. It doesn't matter. Just something that's not your own brain trying to fix it once again. That permission gave me the ability to discover the idea of spirituality. It was liberating. It inspired me. I tried running, and that was great for years and years, and climbing, and hiking, and music, meditation, service work, all becoming part of my journey. My journey even took me to such far-flung places as Beaverton and Gresham. But I'm here now. It's a perfect place for me to learn, to connect, to grow spiritually and without judgment. And for that, I'm very grateful.
Our reading today is from Barbara F. Meyers, an excerpt from Held, Showing Up for Each Other's Mental Health. This piece is titled Spiritual Practice as Coping Mechanism. While many treatments, practices, and lifestyle changes can aid in recovery from mental health problems, studies have shown that the most important is spirituality. Spiritual practice is one of the primary coping mechanisms for people with such problems. Many people can find hope in the faith that they are being held by someone or something larger than themselves. This might be God, a human spirit, or the universe. This faith is at the core of many addiction recovery programs, including 12-step programs. It can allow them to surrender to an entity that receives them unconditionally, to know that they do not suffer alone, and to hope that things can get better. People need spiritual community, not just because they're lonely. They need to be included in a congregation's spiritual development opportunities for both formal and informal. For instance, both the sermon and conversations about it in coffee afterward. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge that our world changed yesterday. While I was at my sister's memorial, the U.S. bombed Iran. I suspect that all of us have deep and disturbing feelings about this. I hope this conversation we are in today is helpful to some of us as we try to process these big feels. Also, I will be using the word God a lot. This is shorthand for higher power, God of reason, spirit of the universe, all-powerful guiding creative intelligence, supreme being, greater reality, universal mind, spirit of nature, God of understanding, power greater than ourselves. You would not believe how many I cut off of this list. I'm going to say God. It's shorthand. I think it stands for group of drunks, and I think we have had expert testimony to that fact already. All right. By the time the rabbi came back to the treatment center, I'd become desperate. I'd taken a second mortgage out on my house to pay for this. The first time the rabbi came, I wasted everyone's time, arguing and arguing and arguing with him. This time I listened. I listened with desperation. And he hit on an analogy that I could grasp as the parent of a 3-year-old. Babies have faith in light switches. Am I kidding? You see a baby, they flip a switch, they look around to see what happened. They have faith something's going to happen. It's that simple. But there is no doubt I was pretty miffed about having to deal with this God stuff at all. I felt tricked. After all, there was a Time magazine at the intake meeting with a cover declaring new ways to get sober. I expected I was going to avoid God and Alcoholics Anonymous's 12-step program entirely. But I'd already paid. And the man had looked into my soul at that intake meeting. Now, months later, he suggested I sit cross-legged on the floor and open myself to being willing to consider an alternative to my entrenched position on this issue. I did. And I've never had a desire to drink alcohol since. What happened? Do I care? Freed as I was from the obsession with alcohol, I opened my senses to a new possibility entirely. God! I began to see coincidence through a new filter. I toyed with the idea of God. I spent a lot of time trying to define God, so much that I put off doing the next steps in the program. I was doing the 1, 2, 3-step dance, and it can be a lot of fun, but it's also a hindrance to true sobriety, which is about more than not drinking. So eventually, God or not, alcohol or not, I was miserable again. I decided then that I did not care the least what God was. I didn't care what you called it. I didn't care if it was intervening. I didn't care at all. God was everything, or God was nothing. There are a lot of reasons we become addicted. Any of us can start to depend on a comforting thing, person, or routine. Dependence can follow. Addiction is ready then. Ready with its promise to keep us comfortable and safe, to be our best friend and never leave us. Addiction keeps those promises, certainly never leaves. Today, though, we don't have to define addiction. I'd like to leave it on a continuum. I'm sure most of us can find ourselves on an addiction continuum. We're a little stressed, and we lean harder into our old standby, whatever that is. Perhaps because, what am I saying? I lost my place entirely. Oh, it can be just about anything. Addiction. Drugs, booze, gambling, sex. Duh. Netflix, Instagram, World of Warcraft. Sure. Control, procrastination, perfectionism. Getting a little uncomfortable, eh? How about exercising, reading, work, therapy, 12-step meetings? I believe pretty much any good thing can become a problem if we use it to avoid ourselves. Now that we can probably all relate to an idea of this continuum, and because we're all adults in the room, and we've all seen how those kids can be when they don't get what they want, I want you to think about that screaming little boy on the plane. He really thought he was going to die. And that's what dependency, that's what addiction feels like. You really think you might die without whatever that is. For me, that's often people, by the way. Wish it was just booze. Eventually, you come to a place where instead of thinking you're going to die without it, you realize that it is going to kill you. This is a place of desperation. In some ways, I was lucky. Having been raised an atheist, I wasn't bogged down with some particular set of rules about what God is. Sure, I got tripped up exploring others' rules and access points for a while. But when I settled on the all or nothing God, I was good to go. My relationship with God is also my own. I supposed I modeled it a little after my talk therapist. It's friendly, it's maddeningly silent. My higher power listens, alleviates loneliness, and provides me a sense of comfort. In the early days, and on occasion still, you'll find me breathing in God and breathing out Shelley. I didn't know how to pray, and I didn't realize I'd started a meditation practice. Tony A., a founding member of Adult Children of Alcoholics, now called Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, God 11 organization that reevaluates itself periodically, quoting from an unnamed source in 1977 on spiritual beginnings of children's needs. He reads, "Spiritual meanings progress in self-consciousness when the child transfers its ideas of omnipotence from its parents to God. The entire spiritual experience of a child depends largely on whether fear or love has dominated the parent-child relationship." On a feeling level, he concludes we cannot trust any higher than we trusted our parents. If our parents were inconsistent, we weren't able to trust them. Why would we trust a higher power? 12 steps gods, therefore, must prove themselves over and over and over again to earn that trust, because we need that reassurance. 12-step practitioners are encouraged to become trustworthy as well by seeking to maintain regular conscious contact with that higher power. Talking with my atheist mom about God was one of the more difficult conversations I've ever had. But eventually she accepted that I accepted. And after that, she was willing to suspend her own disbelief long enough to try some new things, mystical, woo-woo type of things, things she couldn't explain. She doesn't believe in her childhood church's God, but she's gained faith in the power of a river, in alternative medicines, and in whatever is helping me navigate this world. In my early sobriety, I could accept the interconnectedness of people, a bit like the midichlorians in Star Wars. But I wasn't really into the idea of good versus evil, so I veered toward this connectedness of all things. Now I hear folks talking about vibrations, and that makes a ton of sense to me. Alternately, I'd spend some time on concepts that have God inside of me, right here. Still do. Maybe this is my attachment point to everything else. I very much enjoy conversations about what God or what isn't God. Avoid, perfect, a place of infinite possibility. God as love, God as your dog, I'm in. One of my favorite authors, Octavia Butler, created an entirely new religion out of her book, in her book, Parable of the Sower. That concept, that God is change. And maybe that's not a bad one for us today, because things, they are a-changin'. I thrive in the ambiguity of my higher power. For me, the only real requirement is that it is not me. The trick for me is to release my attempts to control. At the core of my faith, really, anything more powerful than myself. You all. Will you please join me in the spirit of prayer and meditation? Find a comfortable place for your body. Breathe as deeply as you are able. Hold in your mind the image of all things, all beings, coming from the same tree, roots stretched in limitless tangles of connection and sustenance, interconnected and interlaced in a web of living and dying that is so beautifully designed and most times invisible.